And in the interview process, remember that it's a two-way process. So it's you determining, is this the right person for you? But you also need to ensure that they are determining that you're the right person for them, that they will be happy working with you.
I swore I'd never hire anyone in my business. Now I have 7 contractors and I'd be lost without every single one of them. But I'm wondering at the back of my mind, should I bite the bullet and hire an employee? Are you thinking of hiring people in your business? Well, I can tell you, having hired lots of people throughout my years in my bank job and having led teams of people and managed people, this was a toughie for me to weigh up because I really thought, do I want to manage people? I didn't want to manage people. I didn't want to lead people. But I recognized to get to that next level in my business, I can't do everything myself. And that's why I brought in guest expert today, who is a HR guru, Louisa Meehan. She's the founder of Woodview HRM. Louisa is fabulous in every way, and she's given me more words of wisdom than this podcast episode is capable of sharing today. And I can tell you, she drops truth bombs faster than you can say grievance procedure throughout this episode. So if you're at the stage in your business where you're thinking about hiring, stay tuned for practical tips, secrets to painless hiring, and most importantly, happy employees. I'm Deirdre Martin, by the way, and if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the Master Your Business podcast. I hope this isn't your first and last time tuning in, because this is the show where we cut through the bullshit and get real about the gritty, messy, and often kind of hilarious world of growing your professional services business. So hit the rate, review, and subscribe button wherever you're listening to this episode. Louisa, I'm so excited to chat to you today, and welcome to the Master Your Business podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here too.
Well, we've been chatting before we hit the record button thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about? Because there's so many nuggets of wisdom that you can bring, which we could talk all day, but we won't. What we're going to talk about, we decided, was for people who've never hired anyone before, what should they do? How do they start? Tell us the things.
Look, I think it's really, really tricky to hire somebody because it's an enormous investment, and it's an investment. It's sort of like the gift that never stops giving necessarily, because once you start and you have staff, it's very hard to go back and not have them. But equally, once you have staff, if it doesn't work out, it becomes really, really complicated. So I think there's a fear factor involved in hiring people. When I'm talking, say, for example, if you're a consultant or you're currently working by yourself completely, where I would start is don't hire anybody. Make sure that you're comfortable in delegating tasks. Make sure maybe have a virtual assistant who does a few hours for you, or different experts with different aspects of what you're not good at, like marketing, for example, something I'm not good at. Have someone to go do that for you. So get used to that process of handing over small tasks to other people. Build up your skill set on that. Once you've done that and you're at the point whereby in order to move forward, you need another you, or you need a mini you, then you need to sit back and say, okay, now I might need to hire someone. The first question is, do you hire an employee or do you get a contractor? And they're very different things, and their rights and entitlements are very, very different. So an employee is someone who you are paying, they're on your payroll, and it is a contract for service, not a contract of service. A contractor might do the same work for you, but they're working for themselves. They invoice you, you pay an invoice, and off they go. You're not responsible for sick leave, annual leave, maternity leave, all of the other cohort of leaves. We could be here all day talking about just leave options. You're not as tied to them. But with a contractor, what I would say is you need to be really careful that a contractor is really truly a contractor. If they are working exclusively for you, if you are controlling their work, if they are an integral part of your business, if you approve annual leave or you agree it, if you cover some pay when they're sick, if they start, you're providing them with the tools and equipment to do their job, maybe they're coming and working in your office with you, all of a sudden you're veering very much into the territory of employee, and you can protect yourself better with it being an employee to a contractor. If it is an employee, a contractor is great where you want to outsource chunks of work. So for example, I do workplace investigations, workplace disciplinaries, grievances, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I do in meetings is I record serious, not every meeting, but serious meetings. I record them on a dictaphone from the 1950s. And I have that sent to a legal secretary who transcribes it. So I don't have to do the transcription. So I might meet somebody for 4 hours. That might take 10 to 12 hours to transcribe. I don't want to do that. It's not a good use of my time. So I outsource that. That works really, really well. With an employee, you're going to give them a wider range of tasks and they're going to work directly with you. So if we have established you definitely want an employee, what do? You need to start with your basics. Before you even go out to market, what are your terms and conditions of employment going to be? And do you have a contract of employment? At a very basic level, you need a contract of employment and have that in place before you have the person in place, because you're hiring for a role, you're not hiring a person. And so it's not your best friend.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction there, I think. You're hiring for a role, not hiring for a person.
You're not hiring a person. It can work beautifully for it to be a friend or a family member or someone that you trust. I've seen that work beautifully. I have also seen it go horribly wrong. And when it goes horribly wrong, the ricochet is huge. Think of that like pebble in the middle of a pond. It goes everywhere. So you need to be really cautious. It's not that I would say never do it, but I would be really, really cautious, because once somebody is your employee and you are their employer, you are in a more powerful position to them. And therefore the dynamics of your relationship fundamentally changes. Okay, so there's certain things that you can't do or can't say that you can with a friend. The Louisa who's hanging out tonight with some of my friends having a glass of wine is a bit more relaxed than the Louisa who turns up at work. And that's just the reality. And it's the reality for all of us. So you need to be really careful. So you need to have your contract and you need to have your terms and conditions. If it was your first ever employee, look, maybe you're making millions and millions and you can afford to pay them whatever you want. Most people I deal with, it's a massive leap to go from no employee to one employee. So at the beginning, at least until they start bringing in their own income and sort of supplementing what you're doing and paying for themselves, I would suggest that you just do the statutory minimum legal requirements across the board. And you can enhance at any point. But if you go in with enhanced terms and conditions, you can't pull back. So you can give whatever you want, but once you've given it, it's really hard to take it back.
Yeah.
So until you're established, until you know what you're doing, I would go basic statutory requirements, a reasonable salary for whatever the job is that you have, whatever the industry, sector, etc. that it is. There's different, there isn't I can't say hire somebody at 30 grand or hire somebody at 100 grand. It just really does depend on what you're doing as to what's appropriate. But that lovely saying, which is probably inappropriate, of if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Like there is an element you have to pay. If you want someone to come and to give their time and energy and do reasonable work, you have to pay a reasonable salary for that skill set of whoever is coming in your door. But you don't have to give all of the additional surplus benefits.
It's interesting. I've been reading the book Buy Back Your Time, and one of the things that Dan Martell, the author, talks about is the first person to hire is an administrative assistant to free you up your time so that you can spend your time doing the valuable things in your business. So those could be your sales and marketing, it could be the delivery that you do with your clients, but when you're not doing all of those transcription things like you talked about, that's 10 hours back of your time where you can be client facing.
Exactly.
And I've heard people describe them as you shouldn't be doing a 20 euro task or a 25 euro task when your client facing stuff could get you 150 euro or 500 euro or however much. So I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of what you're saying there. And that employee could be full-time, right? Could they be part-time too?
Absolutely. Look, the hours, you can determine the hours. And actually it can be incredibly beneficial to start with part-time and build it, as opposed to starting with full-time. It's harder to, again, go back. And as a woman and as a mum with kids, you can actually find some incredible talent who want to work, maybe they want to work school hours. So they might want the summers off, they might want midterms off, all that stuff. And they only want to work 4 hours a day. That could be perfect for a small business. Absolutely perfect. Yes, does it mean your summers are a little bit messy? Probably, but if your business is like mine, summers are a bit messy no matter what you do. So it kind of goes with the territory. And somebody might be willing to say, look, I can't work all of the hours over the summer, but I can log in and I can work around the kids or whatever. And unless it's very small children, most children nowadays are so used to seeing us working remotely in whatever capacity that they can go off and watch a movie for a couple of hours and you can get some work done. So there's lots of different ways to go about it. I would agree completely about the administration. Like try and get someone to do the tasks that you don't enjoy doing, that you're not good at doing, but that they are brilliant at, that they love doing. And that's fantastic. And let them off because they will be better at it than you would ever be. So you do need to try and feel the opposite of who you are, as opposed to getting somebody in to be exactly like you, because then you'll have competing over the same tasks, and that doesn't work out too well. The one trick when it comes to hiring people, so obviously you have to put together some sort of job description, like a list of tasks. What do you want them to do? And go out and see who applies. But once you've got your bunch of CVs and you've kind of gone through them and you're trying to decipher who do you take in and how are you going to go about doing that? I'm going to be really honest in a way that no HR person should ever be. There is a large element of chance to it, and you kind of have to give it a go. I use my intuition. It's intuition that I've built up over decades in terms of doing interviews. So it's like it's a learned intuition as opposed to an inherent one that sort of you're born with, so to speak. But it is important that at some point you have to go out, interview, figure out who you feel would be the right fit for the organization. Skills, tasks, you can teach somebody skills, you can teach them tasks, you can teach them how to use a piece of software within reason. Once they have the basic competency levels, you can teach them tasks. You can't teach them what kind of person to be. You
Yes.
can't teach them their values. You can change values, but no small business owner has the time, capacity, or money to go about doing it. So don't even try. So, you hire for the right personality and person, someone who you're going to get along with, someone that you're going to enjoy working with, but you're going to be able to manage, and somebody who wants to see your business do well.
It's
Um,
interesting because when I'm working with clients on brand and brand strategy, like some of the things we cover, and it's not that that's what brand is in its own, but we do talk about values. And when I'm talking to them about values, I get them to look at them from three perspectives. And one of the perspectives is if you have an employee, how can they prove that they've demonstrated this value during the time that they worked with you? So it's not just about the technical skills or the performance that they achieved, it's their behaviors as well.
Absolutely.
So how can they, like, do you have any other suggestions in terms of job description to make sure that they're attracting people who might be aligned in that way?
Look, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about brand. An employer brand is a HR term. So your employer brand, who you are as an organization, is critical for the type of employees that you're going to attract in. But in terms of what you write down, I mean, the job descriptions are a bit tricky. I think honesty is probably a good idea. Be clear on what your requirements are. Be clear on stuff like educational requirements, skills, background experience, not to the detriment of yourself. So you don't want to cut people off just because they haven't gone to Smurf it. You need to pick the right types of requirements. But I think I would focus more on the interview process when it comes to that. And in the interview process, remember that it's a two-way process. So it's you determining, is this the right person for you? But you also need to ensure that they are determining that you're the right person for them, that they will be happy working with you. And okay, you don't want to share your soul warts and all, but you do want to be honest about the job, honest about your expectations. I would suggest being honest about, look, this is my first time to hire somebody. I'm not 100% sure how this is going to work out or what it's going to look like. There is a job description that's going to change and evolve. We're going to have to create this job together. I'm committed to making it work, but we're going to have to figure that out together. Is that something that you're okay with?
I
Because
know,
not everybody is.
yeah, I love that, but I think it's so important to set expectations at the start because isn't that one of the main reasons relationships break down, it's because somebody's expectations weren't met.
Absolutely. I know setting expectations is a fundamental component of any aspect of HR. Be clear on exactly what it is that you're looking for. You do not want them to have to read between the lines or figure it out or join the dots or any of those things. You want it to be crystal clear. I need you to do this, this, and this. This is the time frame. This is the quality of the work. This is what it looks like. And of course, provide them with the supports. You know, not everything is going to happen perfectly the first time or the second or maybe even the third or fourth, but you need that clarity to begin with. Otherwise, where are you going? You're lost before you start. So you absolutely need to have that clarity from the get-go. And being clear for yourself in terms of who do you want to have working for you? Because like I'm working for myself now for a long time. It's over a decade since I left my corporate life. And I work with people all of the time, but in a way whereby I can go away as well. And when I've had enough of them, I can, I can step away from the situation. So that works out really well for me. And I sometimes think if I had to go back into an office environment or into an environment where I was working with the same person or people 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, I don't know how I would cope or if I would cope with it because it's been so long. So it's a very intense relationship. And you do need to give it time and consideration in terms of compatibility and just you want to enjoy each other's company without being friends. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about it from a professional perspective, but you want it to be a pleasant environment, a pleasant working experience. Another question in the modern world, and I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, considering you're in your fabulous home and I'm up here in Wicklow, is do you want this person working on site? Do you want them to be remote? Do you want it to be hybrid? Are you really not sure either way as to what it is? And if you're not sure, then I would put into the contract that you want it to be in person with some degree of hybrid work available as and when it suits the employer, but be clear about that. Even if at the beginning they're working from home 100%, be clear in the contract and be in what's written down and in all of your communications that the work will be based at a premises as soon as a premises has been identified or at any time at which it is your requirements that, do you want them to be available between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. or do you not mind when the work is done? So being really clear about those things from the beginning is critical, because if there is any degree of ambiguity, then the employee trumps the employer, really. So if you end up going into WRC and there is ambiguity or a lack of clarity, then you are the employer. You are, not David and Goliath, you're Goliath. You're under no illusions, they're David. So you have to be seen to protect yourself from the get-go.
And just on that, Louisa, some people who are listening may not be in Ireland. I have listeners from all over the world.
Of course, sorry.
Is there an equivalent of the WRC outside of Ireland in the US, Canada, and UK?
Yeah, no, there is. I mean, every country has an equivalent. So basically, it's whatever the legal framework is outside of your organization that you go to for employment-related issues or problems. So it's the court system, whatever that is. So here, the WRC is the Workplace Relations Commission. I'm so used to it, I apologize. But in every country across the world, there is somewhere that an employee can go to if there is an employment problem. And once you go there, if you're the employer, you are seen as being the more powerful entity and person in that dynamic. So when you're writing stuff down in your contract, when you're keeping track of your minutes of your meetings and setting your expectations, your goals, all of those things, they absolutely help you, the employee, in terms of giving them clarity, but they protect you as the employer because you're the one in the vulnerable position.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so let me recap really quickly what you said so far and then see what comes next. So what you said is start with the T's and C's in a contract of employment. Step 2 is to look at basic minimum statutory legal employment details, pay a reasonable salary, or be prepared to pay a reasonable salary.
Yeah.
Have your job description done and ready and leave no element to chance. Interview is a two-way process. So look for skills and tasks, but equally look for behaviors. Set expectations really early on, even in the interview stage or before in the job description. Yeah, you're not friends with this potential employee, but yes, you do want to create a pleasant environment and working experience for both of you. And then finally, on-site, remote, hybrid.
There's no perfect answer to that one, but have thought through it before you proceed. And if I was hiring somebody, what I would do, certainly at the beginning, and what I would advise someone to do is to hire somebody in on either a 6-month or a 12-month contract, so that you're giving yourself a get out of jail clause. You can't do that the whole way through if you start hiring lots of people and you have permanent jobs or whatever. But at the beginning, you're just testing the water. At the end of the day, any employee that you bring in, particularly to a small business, they have to do a function, which means that they're paying for themselves. And paying for themselves doesn't mean that they're bringing in the equivalent of their salary or allowing you to bring in that much extra. But they probably need to be bringing in their salary plus about 50% to cover the costs of having them and to allow you have some profit from having that employee there. Otherwise, you really need to sit back and question, is there a benefit? You don't want to grow your business and your responsibilities and your accountabilities and the pressures and anxieties and everything else that comes with it without a payoff. So the payoff doesn't have to happen in the first year, but it needs to happen. So you need to be sure that by bringing this person in, you're going to be more profitable within your organization. And if they're costing you 50,000, I would say that, and this is just rough numbers, but I would say that your business needs to be bringing in an extra 75,000 to cover the cost of having that person there in the first place. Now, obviously, taxes and requirements in different jurisdictions might fluctuate that a little bit, but it's a very rough figure that I'm talking about. But you do need to be allowing for that wriggle room, and some organizations would double it. So if you're bringing somebody in that's costing you 50, you need to be adding 100 into the turnover within your business to accommodate that. Another thing that I do, and certainly this would be relevant within Ireland, the UK, the US, and any country where there is a redundancy payment scheme in situ should somebody be let go. Now, this is a little bit like a wish list item, but I do recommend it. If you have an employee, insofar as is possible, try and also be building up a small nest egg of an emergency fund. So if there is ever a situation whereby there's a serious disciplinary situation, or whereby you need to make a redundancy payment, or you need to make some form of ex gratia payment to have the person go away, and different rules in different countries in relation to that, try and make sure that you have a bit of a nest egg, a bit of a cash buffer in your business to enable you to do it. Now, don't rely on me for how you go about doing that tax efficiently. Talk to your accountant. That's not my area. But, employees can cost a lot of money in a very short time frame unexpectedly. So trying to have a small amount, even if it's that you're saving 5% of what you pay them every month, and it's going in as some sort of buffer for employee related emergencies, it will help. And overall, if it's all there when you're selling your business, or at particular points, if there's large sums in there, then chuck them into your pension scheme or something like that. But I would have some form of a buffer there in case it's needed, because I see the tough times when it is needed, and when small organizations are left with hefty bills for various different reasons, that can be hard to navigate.
That makes sense. And let's say then, okay, so you've done your interviews and you think you found the right person. Very quickly, Louisa, like what would you say are the top 3 things as a new employer that you should do immediately to help this new person integrate into your business quickly and as seamlessly as possible?
So contract and policies, first and foremost. Set goals and expectations. Obviously, they need their tools and equipment, whatever that might be, depends on your business. And then put in place some form of induction and probation process. Now, if it's just you and you're hiring your first person, their induction process is very likely going to be following you around for the first few days or whatever it is. And that's fine. That's a perfectly fine induction process. But have a probation process in place. So meet with them, after the first 4 weeks, after the first 3 months, after the first 6 months. And if it is not working for you during that probation period, trust your intuition and address the matter during that probation period. Do not let it fester. Within Ireland, there's certain rules around it. Different countries have different rules around what you can do during that period. But in almost all countries, it is easier to address an employment situation during a probationary period than at any other point in employment. So do not ignore concerns. For the most part, it works out. For the most part, it's brilliant and it's a really, really good investment. It's just you talk to people like me when it doesn't work out. And I would say don't ignore the niggles. And most of the time when I'm dealing with big problems and I talk to managers, if they're honest, there were niggles during probation. So
Okay.
don't ignore them.
Right. That makes sense. It's a little bit like red flags when you're dating somebody before you get married, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that once we commit to hiring somebody, it's a huge decision to make and it's a huge commitment. So therefore we want to prove to ourselves and to the world that we're good at making decisions and we made the right decision. And so this is the right person and we're going to make it work. But you know what? The best recruiters out there in the best organizations who are doing this day in and day out get it wrong sometimes. What matters is being willing to assess the situation based on what you need. And sometimes having someone come in, it's not that they're a bad employee, but sometimes they're just not the right fit. And it just isn't working. And that might actually enable you to go, I really appreciate what you've done to help me. However, this isn't working out for me. And then you can go back out to the market and say, now I know what I don't want.
Yes.
So
because I did that with boyfriends before I finally met them.
well, that's right. That's where I went wrong, obviously. But don't tell my husband. But yeah, I think like it's really important that you have to kind of figure it out. And sometimes you can be lucky and that can work first time. And sometimes it's not that the person is a bad person or a bad employee or not valuable, but sometimes it's just not the right fit for your organization or for your situation. And being brave and saying it before it becomes an issue is absolutely what I would advise.
That makes total sense. Louisa, you have summed up how to go about hiring an employee really, really well, really quickly too. So tell me, as we wrap up, what are the key takeaways or suggestions or anything else that you'd like to add for listeners around this topic?
I think, move forward with caution because employees and HR and everything HR related is, for the majority of organizations, it is the single biggest investment you'll make. So, you might be sitting there in a situation where you've spent an enormous amount of money on equipment or tasks or produce or whatever it is. And you might be listening to me going, she's having a laugh. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Actually, it doesn't really matter what you do. Employees are almost always your single biggest liability on your balance sheet. They're also your biggest asset. Okay, so the current terminology is talking about it as human capital because they're your single biggest investment as well, and they will bring about the most amount of growth and opportunity and development. So that's amazing. But there's a great old saying, everything comes at a cost. So tread with caution, take your time, talk to a professional if you need to, talk to other business owners who have done it before because they will share their scars with you quite happily, but tread with caution.
Love that. Love that. Louisa, thank you so much for joining us in the Master Your Business podcast.
No, thank you for having me.
I'm going to share all of your links and contact information in the show notes, but tell us what's coming up for you. What's happening for Woodview HR?
Well, I am up to my eyes at the minute with investigations and mediations and grievances. So believe it or not, I am taking a little rest next week. I'm taking some time out with my kids for the Easter break, and I cannot wait. So focusing in on I suppose dealing with conflict in the workplace will be something that I do a lot of work with, and then teaching and training around that. And in my off time or my fun time, I'm doing some work, sort of doing MC work and on panels and panel discussions, which I know you have been at some of those in the past. So I enjoy doing that as well.
Yes, and lots of radio interviews too, Louisa.
Yes, I keep forgetting. Yes, lots of radio interviews. So I'm on News Talk fairly regularly, and I'll be on News Talk again on Saturday morning, Easter Saturday, and I'm on East Coast FM I had my first ever live broadcast last week with East Coast FM, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool, cool. Louisa, thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Whoa, my brain is buzzing. Don't you just love Louisa's no nonsense approach to what we just talked about? It's really, I think, what we needed. So let's just recap a little bit first into what our wisdom was. So here's the lowdown on mastering your HR game. Hire smart, think skills and values. The right person is worth a little training. Start with basic pay and benefits. You can always sweeten the pot later on if need be. Check in like crazy, especially during the probation period, because don't overlook any of those red flags. Do the maths, make sure your employees bring in enough books to cover their salary and a whole lot more. And termination funds. It might sound harsh, but life happens. So it's better to have a cash buffer ready if things go south. So before you head off, here's some homework. And to put into practice what Louisa spoke about, first thing is delegate. Start freeing up your time by outsourcing tasks to contractors. And probably that first person you need is an administrative assistant. Second, get a basic employment contract ready before you even think about hiring. So maybe start looking into that now. Third, be honest and upfront about what your potential employee is coming in for. What is the role? Fourth, pay. How much are you going to pay? What's the going rate for that type of role within your industry? And lastly, start putting some money aside. That's it. Just be prepared for every eventuality. Folks, if you loved this episode, then hit that subscribe button and don't forget to rate or review the show. Your feedback keeps us going. So until next week, keep mastering your business.